Hey students and family members, Mr. Panza. Answering this question, how do we use figurative language? In previous lessons we talked about one piece of figurative language called alliteration. Today we're discussing similes. The most important thing you need to know about similes is that it is comparing two different things, using the word like or as. Now in the other video you heard lots of examples of two different things being compared using the words like or as, but I think it leaves some things out. I'd like to give you my example, which goes similar to the song, as hungry as a hippo. In this one it's comparing hunger to a hippo, or as gigantic as a truck. You're comparing somebody's size to that of a truck. Somebody's size is totally different than a truck. However, when you connect it with the word as, or like for that matter, then you are creating a simile because you are comparing two totally different things using the word like or as. Let's look at more examples. Pleasant as a meadow. A meadow can be seen as pleasant, but a meadow is totally different than the feeling of pleasant. And when you use them in a sentence like this, connecting them with as, you've created a simile. As loud as an explosion. Using the word as compares loud to explosion. Now what I would suggest is what we see in the next three examples. You can actually see that we are talking about he or she or his game and comparing it to things that are definitely different than a person. He can certainly be hungry, but can't have hunger like a wolf. She can certainly be frail, but not like a feather. And when you use two unlike things comparing a person's frail frame or a boy's hunger to things that they are not, like a wolf or a feather, then you are creating a simile. The third and final example, his game, whether it be basketball, soccer, football, is being compared to a hot summer day. So the hot summer day and somebody who's good at sports are two totally different things. But when you use the word like or as to compare two totally different things in the same sentence, you have created a simile. My suggestion to you would be in sentences like the first few examples when we see as hungry as a hippo or as gigantic as a truck would be to try and compare what we're talking about. Who is as hungry as a hippo? Maybe if you just added Mr. Panza's name, then you have a more detailed simile. Mr. Panza is as hungry as a hippo, and the reason that's a greater simile than just as hungry as a hippo is because if you say that Mr. Panza is as hungry as a hippo, you are now talking about a person and comparing that person to an animal, which is a hippo. So in this case, Mr. Panza being compared to a hippo would be the simile, because you're comparing Mr. Panza to a hippo and his hunger to a hippo using the word as to connect the two. You can do the same for the other examples that Mr. Panza gave. I'm missing something here. What is as gigantic as a truck? Trucks can certainly be gigantic, so this is not the best example of a simile. However, if you think about a person or a thing that is not a truck, so for example you could say, well, the dog is as gigantic as a truck, you are now comparing two unlike things. A dog is not a truck, but when we compare them to each other and use the connecting word either as or like, you've created a simile. A loud explosion. What was as loud as explosion? You could say the person's voice. So Mr. Panza's voice is as loud as an explosion. And now that I'm comparing the voice of Mr. Panza, who is a person and their voice, to being as loud as an explosion, then connecting it with as or like makes it a simile. And then this final one, as pleasant as a meadow. What is as pleasant as a meadow? You could once again say her voice is as pleasant as a meadow. Now it's not just meadow being pleasant, it's a person's voice that's considered to be pleasant and comparing it to a meadow, which is a totally different thing than a person's voice, and using the connector word like or as makes it a simile. Why do we use similes or any type of figurative language? Because it helps readers really get drawn into the reading and helps writers become better and more interesting writers. Thanks. Hope this helps.